and invade it and hurt people. And then you know what they did on top of that? After they edited the president's speech, he didn't say what they said he said. They showed a clip of the Proud Boys. We all know who the Proud Boys are. Marching on the Capitol, as if the Proud Boys were acting in response, in direct response to the president's speech that the BBC...
A state-funded broadcaster, a documented report, and a quote that was never said, read aloud on the Senate floor. Watch carefully.
$4 billion a year. Our national broadcasting programs were just pikers compared to theirs. And they've got tentacles like an octopus. I mean, the BBC is everywhere, not just in the United Kingdom. It's omnipresent. I mean, I was doing some research today. I mean, they broadcast 4 entertainment-oriented television channels. They broadcast 2 children's channels. They broadcast Parliament. They have local language channels in Scotland and Wales. They have a domestic 24-hour news channel. And these folks are everywhere. They run dozens of radio stations. They operate their own video and audio streaming services. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Why am I mentioning that? Well, the BBC is a big deal. They reach a lot of people, millions and millions of people, not just in the United Kingdom, but across the world. And it's important that they be fair. And it's important that they be balanced. And it's important that they be accurate. And they're not. And it's been a problem for a long time. 5 or 6 years ago, at the suggestion of Parliament, which was very upset with the BBC's bias, they hired a consultant, a smart gentleman, and he did a report on how to improve BBC and make it fairer. It was a huge report. Here's just part of it right here. This isn't even all of it, but this is just the summary right here. Spent hours, spent a lot of money preparing this report. He sent it to the BBC. And you know what the BBC did? Nothing. Nothing. Zero. Zilch. Nada. They just continued on doing what they always do, sucking on their teeth, publishing whatever they want. And nothing would have happened except the report issued by the consultant leaked. Somebody leaked it to a newspaper in the United Kingdom, the Telegraph, and they published it.
Stop. What just happened here is not a media criticism speech. This is a sitting U.S. senator on the Senate floor presenting documented evidence that a foreign state-funded broadcaster deliberately edited the American president's words to manufacture a call for violence. That is not bias. That is construction. And the BBC's own hired consultant confirmed it, then was ignored. The report didn't change anything until it leaked. Ask yourself who benefits when a foreign broadcaster frames an American election 1 week before voters go to the polls. Drop your answer in the comments, because the silence on this story is louder than the speech itself.
And the whole world got to see what the BBC's own consultant had found. I'll give you a couple of examples. We all remember January 6th. President Trump gave a speech. We've all seen it. It was a long speech. It was about an hour, maybe longer. A week before the last presidential election in America, the BBC did a documentary on President Trump. And you know what they did? They took his hour-plus long speech, and they took 2 snippets from that speech. One snippet at the beginning and one snippet at the end. The excerpts that the BBC took were 50 minutes apart. So they took them totally out of context. And they spliced those two excerpts together to make it look like one speech. And they had the President of the United States making a direct plea for violence. The way the BBC edited the President's speech, he was telling the people at his speech to march on the Capitol and invade it. Well, that's not what his speech said. Now, reasonable people can disagree all they want to, but no reasonable person can listen to the President's speech and conclude that he told people to go out and riot and break into the Capitol. But the BBC took these two snippets, put it together. I defy you. Listen to it. They've pulled it down now, but it's on the internet. It sounds like the President is telling his supporters, go to the Capitol and raise fresh hell and invade it and hurt people. And then you know what they did on top of that? After they edited the President's speech, he didn't say what they said he said. They showed a clip of the Proud Boys. We all know who the Proud Boys are. Marching on the Capitol, as if the Proud Boys were acting in direct response to the President's speech that the BBC edited. One problem. The footage that they aired of the Proud Boys, it didn't happen after the President's speech. It happened, the footage of the Proud Boys marching along was way before he ever gave the speech. And they packaged this junk together and ran it on television. And this consultant called them out. And the BBC ignored it. You know what else the consultant found?
The BBC didn't make a mistake. Mistakes get corrected. What Senator Kennedy just described on the Senate floor is something far more specific and far more deliberate. Two audio clips pulled from an hour-long speech, 50 minutes apart, stitched together into a single sequence that doesn't exist. Footage of the Proud Boys marching, aired as if it was a direct response to that speech, when the footage was recorded before the speech ever happened. This isn't sloppy journalism. Sloppy journalism leaves fingerprints of laziness. This has the fingerprints of intent. And here is what makes this moment different from every other media criticism speech you've ever half-watched. The BBC's own consultant said the same thing. Not a political opponent, not a rival network. Their own hired expert, paid by the BBC, commissioned by the BBC, looked at the footage, looked at the editing, looked at the fabricated quotes, and sent it back to them in writing. And the BBC filed it, sat on it, ignored every single recommendation. Nothing changed until someone leaked it to the Telegraph. Think about what that sequence actually means. An institution collecting $4 billion a year from citizens who have no choice but to pay, confirmed by its own internal review to be manufacturing quotes, staging footage, and running it as news. And the institutional response was silence. Not a correction, not a firing, not a statement. Silence. But here is what nobody is asking. Why does this matter to an American audience? Kennedy answers that question directly, and it's the part most coverage will skip entirely. The BBC isn't a UK problem contained within UK borders. It broadcasts globally. It is omnipresent, his word and the right word. When a foreign state broadcaster frames an American president 1 week before a presidential election as someone inciting violence, and that framing reaches millions of viewers across dozens of countries, that is not a domestic media dispute. That is international narrative warfare dressed in the language of public broadcasting. Think about what this means if you are sitting on the other side of this. If you are a voter in the United Kingdom or Australia or Canada or any English-speaking country where BBC is the default news source, you are not getting analysis. You are getting a product designed, edited, and packaged by people who ignored their own internal ethics report and kept broadcasting anyway. Now consider the fabricated quotes. A BBC reporter stated on air that Donald Trump said he wanted people to shoot Liz Cheney in the face. He never said that. A second BBC reporter claimed Trump appeared to suggest Cheney should face a firing squad for her foreign policy stance. He never said that either. These are not misinterpretations. A misinterpretation starts with something that was actually said. These quotes were built from nothing. The consultant's report flagged both. The BBC's response was to keep the reporters on air. Why now? That is the question. Kennedy is raising this on the Senate floor at a specific moment, after Trump has publicly stated his intention to sue the BBC. That lawsuit threat is the engine under this speech. Kennedy is building the public record. He is doing it methodically. The funding structure, the scale of reach, the ignored consultant report, the fabricated quotes, the biased Gaza documentary, the live music broadcast calling for Israeli soldiers' deaths, the suppressed findings on transgender coverage. Each example is a brick. By the end of the speech, he's built a wall. Supporters of this position will argue, and they have a legitimate point, that a broadcaster of this scale, with this level of state funding and this level of global reach, operating with documented and self-confirmed bias, represents a genuine threat to informed democratic participation. When $4 billion a year buys you the ability to reach hundreds of millions of people, accuracy isn't optional. It's a civic obligation. The consultant said that. Parliament said that. The BBC said nothing. Critics will counter that Kennedy is a Republican senator defending a Republican president, and that framing a lawsuit threat as righteous accountability is precisely the kind of political theater the Senate floor was not designed for. They will point out that media criticism from politicians is almost always self-serving, and that a senator calling for a foreign broadcaster to be sued is not the same as a senator presenting verified journalism reform. Those critics are not entirely wrong. But here is what both camps are missing entirely. The issue is not whether you like Donald Trump. The issue is not whether you trust the BBC. The issue is the mechanism. When any institution, state-funded or private, foreign or domestic, edits source material to reverse its meaning, attributes quotes to a person who never said them, and then ignores its own internal findings that confirm the deception, the political identity of the target is irrelevant. The mechanism itself is the threat. Because a mechanism that works on one target works on any target. Today it's Trump. The architecture doesn't care who comes next. Kennedy closes with something personal. He says it makes him want to stick his head in an oven. That line got laughs. But behind the performance is a documented report, a leaked finding, a $4 billion institution, and a lawsuit that hasn't been filed yet. If this is the level of analysis you are not finding in your regular feed, you already know what to do. The BBC has not corrected the fabricated quotes. The reporters who aired them are still working. The consultant's report exists. The Telegraph published it, and a U.S. senator just entered it into the congressional record. This story is not finished. The lawsuit, if it moves